Just as the courtroom settled into its usual rhythm, the doors burst open, revealing a tearful young girl clutching a crumpled paper. Her voice rang out, silencing everyone, "Stop. You're punishing the wrong person." What she revealed next left the judge, and everyone else, completely stunned. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as Judge Victoria Hale presided over the case of Grayson Hall, a man accused of embezzling a substantial sum from his employer. The air was heavy with the weight of the accusations, and Victoria's sharp gaze moved from the defense attorney to the prosecutor, her expression unreadable. Grayson sat at the defendant's table, his head slightly bowed, his face a mix of fatigue and resignation. The prosecutor, a confident woman in her mid-30s, was mid-sentence, emphasizing Grayson's betrayal of trust, when the large double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a loud bang. Gasps rippled through the audience as all eyes turned toward the source of the commotion. A young girl, no older than 10, stood in the doorway. Her hair was slightly messy, her clothes looked hastily put on, and tears streaked her round cheeks. She clutched a crumpled piece of paper in her hand, her small chest rising and falling as though she had run all the way there. "Stop," she cried, her voice trembling but loud enough to command the room's attention. "Please stop. You don't understand, he's my dad, and he's not a bad man." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Even Victoria, known for her unshakable composure, felt a jolt of surprise ripple through her. She tapped her gavel once to restore order, though the murmurs of shock and confusion persisted for a few moments longer. The bailiff approached the girl, leaning down to speak quietly to her. "You can't interrupt court like this, young lady," he said gently. "I had to," she insisted, clutching the paper closer to her chest. "You're making a mistake." Victoria leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. "Bailiff, bring her forward. Let's find out what this is about." The bailiff escorted the girl to the front of the courtroom. She stopped just before the judge's bench, her wide eyes locking with Victoria's. "What's your name?" Victoria asked, her tone softening. "Amara," the girl replied, her voice small but steady. "Amara Hall. Grayson Hall is my dad." Victoria's sharp mind instantly began piecing the situation together. She glanced toward Grayson, who had risen halfway out of his seat, his face pale. "Amara," he said, his voice hoarse, "what are you doing here?" Amara looked back at him, her tears spilling over again. "I couldn't let them say those things about you. They don't know why you did it." Victoria's curiosity deepened. "Amara, what do you mean by that?" she asked. "Why are you here?" The girl hesitated for a moment before holding up the crumpled paper. "I brought this. It's a letter from my mom. She wanted me to give it to someone if things got really bad." Victoria gestured for the bailiff to take the letter. As he handed it to her, she could feel the weight of the moment settling over the courtroom. She carefully unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the handwritten lines. The contents made her pause. It was a plea for understanding, written by a woman named Evelyn Hall, Grayson's late wife. The letter described their family's desperate struggle to pay for Amara's medical treatments after she was diagnosed with a rare illness. Evelyn wrote about Grayson's efforts to support the family, including taking on extra shifts and selling personal belongings, but even that hadn't been enough. The final lines of the letter begged whoever read it to have compassion for her husband, who had only tried to save their daughter. Victoria set the letter down, her mind racing. The courtroom waited in silence, the tension almost tangible. She turned her gaze back to Amara, who stood trembling but determined. "Amara," Victoria said gently, "thank you for bringing this to our attention. But interrupting court is very serious. Do you understand that?" The girl nodded quickly, her tears drying on her cheeks. "I do, but I didn't know what else to do. My dad, he's all I have." Victoria's chest tightened at the raw emotion in the girl's voice. She tapped her gavel again. This court will recess for 1 hour. I need to review this new information. As the court emptied, Victoria signaled for the bailiff to escort Amara and her father to her chambers. Grayson shot Victoria a grateful but hesitant look as he guided his daughter out of the room. Left alone for a moment, Victoria picked up the letter again, rereading the heartfelt words. Memories of her own daughter, who had passed away years ago from a similar illness, came rushing back. She pressed her lips together, fighting the wave of emotion threatening to overwhelm her. This case, she realized, had just become far more complicated than she could have anticipated. In the quiet of her chambers, Judge Victoria Hale sat across from Grayson and Amara Hall. The air between them was heavy with unspoken tension. Amara sat close to her father, her small hand gripping his arm tightly, as if afraid he might vanish if she let go. Grayson, visibly weary, seemed torn between relief that his daughter was near and concern over the consequences of her interruption. Victoria placed the crumpled letter on her desk, smoothing it out as she looked at them both. "Amara," she began, her tone calm but firm, "I need you to explain to me why you ran into the courtroom like that." Amara's lower lip trembled, but she held her ground. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her voice trembling. "They're saying my dad is a criminal, but he's not. He didn't steal because he's bad. He stole because of me." Grayson inhaled sharply, his face etched with pain. "Amara, you don't have to do this," he said softly. "Yes, I do," she insisted, turning to him. "If I don't tell the truth, they'll take you away." Victoria's gaze moved between them, her curiosity deepening. She folded her hands on her desk. "Amara, what do you mean when you say he stole because of you?" Amara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "My mom got really sick, and then I did too. We didn't have money for the treatments I needed. My dad tried everything, he worked extra hours, sold stuff from the house, but it wasn't enough. He only took the money because he was trying to save me." Victoria leaned back in her chair, the weight of the girl's words sinking in. She turned to Grayson, whose face was shadowed with regret. "Is this true?" she asked. Grayson hesitated, then nodded. "It is," he admitted. "Amara was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder not long after Evelyn, my wife, passed away. The treatments were expensive, and I couldn't keep up with the bills. I made a terrible decision, but I did it for her." Victoria studied him carefully. "Why didn't you tell this to your attorney? Or bring it up in your defense?" Grayson looked down at his hands. "I didn't think it would matter," he said quietly. "What I did was still wrong, no matter the reason. And I didn't want to drag Amara into it." Amara shook her head fiercely. "But it does matter. You were just trying to help me." Victoria felt a pang in her chest at the girl's words. They reminded her of her own daughter, Lily, who had battled leukemia years ago. Victoria had done everything in her power to save her, even selling her house to afford treatment. Despite all her efforts, Lily had passed away, leaving a void in Victoria's life that had never fully healed. Taking a deep breath, Victoria focused on the present. "Grayson, while your intentions might have been noble, the law doesn't excuse theft," she said. "But I need to know more before I make any decisions. Amara, you mentioned your mother left this letter for you. Do you know why?" Amara nodded. "She said it was for when things got really bad. She wanted me to give it to someone who could help." Victoria picked up the letter again, reading the heartfelt words once more. Evelyn's love for her family was clear in every line, as was her desperation. Victoria's throat tightened as she considered the sacrifices Grayson had made and the weight Amara carried for her age. After a long pause, Victoria looked back at them. "Here's what I'm going to do," she said. "I'll call for an independent review of the evidence against you, Grayson. I want to make sure that all the circumstances surrounding your actions are taken into account. In the meantime, Amara will stay under supervised care either with you or a guardian. Grayson's eyes widened. Supervised care? What does that mean? It means you'll remain together for now, but there will be oversight to ensure Amara's well-being, Victoria explained. This isn't a punishment, it's to protect both of you while I dig deeper into this case. Amara looked at her father nervously. We can still be together, she asked. Victoria nodded. Yes. But you have to promise me something, Amara. The girl straightened in her seat. Anything. No more interruptions in the courtroom, Victoria said, her voice soft but serious. If you want to help your dad, you have to let me do my job. Amara nodded quickly. I promise. Grayson leaned forward, his voice low but steady. Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know how to make this right, but I'll do whatever it takes. Victoria's gaze softened. What's important now is figuring out the truth, she said. And making sure Amara has the stability she needs. As the bailiff escorted them out, Victoria leaned back in her chair, her thoughts swirling. This case had taken an unexpected turn, and the stakes felt far more personal than she was accustomed to. She glanced at the letter on her desk once more, the weight of Evelyn's words pressing heavily on her heart. I'll find the truth, Victoria murmured to herself. For their sake, and for hers. The next morning, Judge Victoria Hale found herself deep in thought as she reviewed the details of Grayson Hall's case. The letter from Evelyn had changed everything, and Victoria was determined to uncover the full truth behind the allegations. She had ordered a temporary suspension of the trial to allow time for an independent investigation, but she knew the pressure was mounting. The prosecution would push back, arguing that Grayson's actions were illegal regardless of his motivations. The legal system wasn't designed to weigh morality against the law, and yet Victoria couldn't ignore the humanity behind this case. Victoria called a meeting with her clerk, Sarah, and an investigator she trusted, Detective Caleb Morris. She handed Caleb the letter and outlined her suspicions. I need you to verify the claims in this letter, she said. Find out if Grayson's employer, Marcus Langston, knew about his situation. And look into the company's finances. I want to know if there's more to this than meets the eye. Caleb raised an eyebrow. You think the employer might have something to hide? I'm not ruling anything out, Victoria replied. But I want facts, not speculation. Follow the trail, and let me know what you find. While Caleb set off on his investigation, Victoria turned her attention to Amara. The girl had been placed in temporary supervised care with her father, under the watchful eye of a social worker named Linda Moore. Linda, a seasoned professional with a kind demeanor, reported back to Victoria daily on how the pair were adjusting. They're doing well, all things considered, Linda said during one of their check-ins. Amara is incredibly resilient, but she's still a child who's been through a lot. She clings to her father, she's terrified of losing him. Victoria nodded, the weight of Linda's words pressing heavily on her. Keep me updated, she said. I want to make sure she's safe and supported. Later that afternoon, Victoria decided to visit Amara and Grayson herself. She had arranged the visit as part of her oversight responsibilities, but she also wanted to see the dynamic between them firsthand. She arrived at the modest apartment where they were staying, a small but tidy space filled with signs of their life together, Amara's drawings pinned to the fridge, a worn teddy bear on the couch, and a stack of medical bills on the kitchen counter. Grayson greeted her at the door, looking wary but respectful. Your Honor, he said, stepping aside to let her in. Mr. Hall, Victoria replied, her tone professional but not unkind. I wanted to check in and see how you're both doing. Amara peeked out from behind her father, her face lighting up when she saw Victoria. Judge Hale, she exclaimed. Did you come to help my dad? I'm here to make sure everything is going smoothly, Victoria said, kneeling slightly to meet Amara's gaze. How are you holding up? Amara hesitated, then shrugged. I'm okay. I just want this to be over. I hate seeing my dad so worried. Grayson placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression softening. She's been my rock through all of this, he said. Stronger than I ever could have imagined. Victoria's chest tightened at the obvious bond between them. She spent the next hour observing their interactions, Grayson helping Amara with her homework, making her laugh with a silly joke, and preparing dinner as she chatted about her favorite books. It was clear that despite their struggles, they had a deep and loving connection. When Victoria returned to her office, Caleb was waiting for her with a preliminary report. You were right to ask questions, he said, handing her a file. I found discrepancies in the company's financial records. It looks like Marcus Langston has been funneling money through shell accounts for years. Grayson's so-called embezzlement might have been a convenient way to cover Langston's tracks. Victoria's eyes widened as she read through the report. If Langston had been using Grayson as a scapegoat, it changed the entire narrative of the case. She leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. This could be the break we need, she said. But we need more evidence to prove it. Caleb nodded. I'm working on it. I'll get you what you need. As the day ended, Victoria sat alone in her office, staring out the window at the city lights. The case was becoming more complicated with every revelation, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just fighting for justice in a legal sense, she was fighting for Amara's future and the truth about her father's actions. I won't let them down, she murmured to herself. Not this time. Victoria Hale spent the following days piecing together the intricate puzzle of Grayson Hall's case. The new evidence provided by Detective Caleb Morris pointed to a potential cover-up orchestrated by Marcus Langston, Grayson's employer. The implications were staggering. Langston might have used Grayson's desperation to mask his own financial misdeeds. However, Victoria knew that proving this in court would require airtight evidence. Meanwhile, she couldn't stop thinking about Amara. The girl's bravery and determination had left a deep impression on her, and Victoria felt an almost maternal instinct to protect her. This case was no longer just about legal justice, it was about ensuring a better future for Amara, who had already suffered so much. One morning, as Victoria reviewed the latest updates from Caleb, she received a call from Linda Moore, the social worker overseeing Amara's care. Judge Hale, I thought you should know that Amara hasn't been herself lately, Linda said. She's been quieter, and she seems anxious about the case. Victoria sighed, the weight of the situation pressing on her shoulders. I'll visit them this afternoon, she said. I want to make sure Amara knows we're doing everything we can. That afternoon, Victoria arrived at the modest apartment Grayson and Amara called home. Grayson answered the door, his face lined with exhaustion but his expression warm. Your Honor, he greeted her, stepping aside. Please, come in. Amara was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest as she doodled in a sketchbook. When she saw Victoria, her eyes lit up, but the excitement quickly faded into a hesitant smile. Hi, Judge Hale, she said softly. Victoria knelt beside her, her tone gentle. Hi, Amara. I wanted to see how you're doing. Amara shrugged, her eyes drifting to her sketchbook. Okay, I guess. I just want everything to be over. Victoria sat down beside her. I understand. It's a lot for someone your age to handle. But I want you to know that we're working hard to help your dad. Detective Morris found some important information that might change everything. Amara's eyes widened slightly. Really? You mean he might not go to jail? Victoria placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. That's the goal. But it's important to stay strong and trust the process. Your dad loves you very much, and he's doing everything he can to make things right. Grayson, who had been standing nearby, joined them. She's been my strength through all of this, he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't know how she does it." Amara looked up at him, her expression softening. "Because you're my dad," she said simply. "I have to." The moment was a poignant reminder of the stakes involved in this case. Victoria felt a renewed determination to see it through, no matter how complicated it became. Later that evening, back at her office, Victoria reviewed the files Caleb had sent over. The financial discrepancies were damning, but she needed more concrete proof to link Langston to the alleged fraud. She decided to subpoena Langston for questioning, knowing it would ruffle feathers but confident it was the right move. The next day, Marcus Langston arrived in court, his demeanor calm but his eyes sharp with suspicion. He was a tall, well-dressed man who exuded confidence, but Victoria had faced plenty of men like him in her career. She wasn't intimidated. Langston's attorney protested the subpoena, but Victoria overruled the objection. "Mr. Langston," she said, her voice steady, "we have questions about the financial records of your company. Specifically, about certain transactions that coincide with the accusations against Mr. Hall." Langston's face remained impassive, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, annoyance, perhaps, or unease. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Your Honor," he said smoothly. "But my company operates within the bounds of the law." "We'll let the evidence speak for itself," Victoria replied. She allowed the prosecution to present the financial discrepancies Caleb had uncovered, laying the groundwork for what she hoped would be a larger revelation. As the questioning continued, Langston began to show cracks in his polished facade. He avoided direct answers and deflected responsibility, blaming lower-level employees for any irregularities. Victoria took careful note of his behavior, knowing it could be used against him later. By the end of the session, Victoria felt they were one step closer to exposing the truth. She adjourned the court and returned to her chambers, where Caleb was waiting. "He's hiding something," she said, tossing her notes onto the desk. "But we need more to corner him." "I'm working on it," Caleb said. "There's a paper trail somewhere, and I'll find it." Victoria nodded, her resolve unshaken. "Good. Because we're not just fighting for Grayson's freedom, we're fighting for Amara's future." As the night wore on, Victoria couldn't shake the image of Amara's hopeful face. The little girl had placed her trust in the justice system, and Victoria was determined not to let her down. The courtroom was buzzing with anticipation as the trial resumed. The testimony from Marcus Langston had left more questions than answers, and Judge Victoria Hale knew the next steps were critical. The prosecution was building its case against Grayson Hall, but Victoria could sense the tide beginning to turn. The evidence Caleb had uncovered painted a much more complex picture, one that suggested Grayson might have been a scapegoat for Langston's larger schemes. Victoria arrived at the courthouse early, her mind racing with strategies to ensure the truth came to light. She knew she had to remain impartial as a judge, but her heart was invested in this case more than she cared to admit. Amara's tearful face and Grayson's quiet resolve lingered in her thoughts, pushing her to dig deeper. Detective Caleb Morris walked into her chambers, carrying a folder thick with new evidence. "I've got something," he said, his tone confident. "Langston's shell accounts lead to offshore banks. We traced several transactions that align with the timeline of the alleged embezzlement. It looks like he funneled company money through these accounts and pinned the blame on Grayson when things got messy." Victoria flipped through the folder, her eyes scanning the bank records and emails Caleb had collected. The evidence was damning. Langston's name appeared repeatedly, and his attempts to disguise the transactions were clumsy at best. "This is exactly what we need," she said, her voice firm. "I'll admit these findings into evidence." Later that morning, as court was called to session, the prosecution opened with a sharp focus on Grayson's supposed betrayal. They presented Grayson's unauthorized access to company funds as proof of his guilt, painting him as a man who exploited his position for personal gain. Victoria remained silent, her expression neutral, but inside she was growing impatient. She knew the defense's turn was coming, and that was when things would shift. When it was finally time for the defense, Grayson's attorney stood confidently. "Your Honor," he began, "we'd like to present new evidence that challenges the prosecution's narrative." Victoria gave a nod, signaling for him to proceed. Caleb's investigation had uncovered more than just financial records. It had also revealed a series of emails between Langston and a subordinate, instructing them to manipulate the company's books and implicate Grayson if the fraud was discovered. As these emails were displayed on the courtroom screen, gasps rippled through the audience. The defense attorney turned to Langston, who sat in the gallery, his jaw tight. "Mr. Langston, would you care to explain these communications?" he asked. Langston's attorney objected, claiming irrelevance, but Victoria overruled it. "Mr. Langston," she said, her voice sharp, "you're under oath. Answer the question." Langston shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence visibly shaken. "Those emails were taken out of context," he stammered. "They don't prove anything." The defense attorney pressed further. "Is it true that funds were moved to offshore accounts under your direction? And that Mr. Hall was unaware of these transactions?" Langston's silence spoke volumes. The courtroom watched as his composure cracked, sweat beading on his forehead. "I have nothing more to say," he finally muttered. Victoria's gavel struck the bench. "Mr. Langston, your behavior will be reviewed thoroughly. For now, this court will adjourn to evaluate the presented evidence." As the courtroom emptied, Victoria stayed behind, lost in thought. Langston's attempts to shift blame had unraveled under scrutiny, but she knew the case wasn't over. The prosecution would regroup, and the final verdict still loomed. Later that day, Victoria visited Grayson and Amara in the supervised care facility. Amara was sitting at a small table, drawing pictures of her family, one of her mother, father, and herself holding hands under a bright sun. When she saw Victoria, her face lit up. "Judge Hale," she exclaimed, running over to hug her. Victoria knelt to meet her, a rare smile softening her features. "Hi, Amara. I just wanted to check in. How are you doing?" Amara glanced at her father, who stood a few feet away, his expression a mix of gratitude and weariness. "We're okay," she said. "But, is my dad going to be free?" Victoria placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're working on it," she said gently. "The truth is coming out, and I promise we won't stop until we get to the bottom of this." Grayson approached, his voice quiet but steady. "Thank you, Your Honor. For everything." Victoria stood, meeting his gaze. "Don't thank me yet. We still have work to do. But know this, I believe you." As she left, Victoria felt a renewed sense of determination. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the fight wasn't over. She had to ensure justice was served, not just for Grayson, but for Amara, whose future depended on the outcome. The stakes were higher than ever, but Victoria was ready to see it through to the end. The next hearing arrived with an air of tension and anticipation. The courtroom was packed, the media catching wind of the explosive evidence revealed during the last session. Grayson Hall sat at the defendant's table, his posture slightly straighter than before. There was a glimmer of hope in his eyes, but it was tempered by caution. Amara sat in the gallery with Linda Moore, clutching a small drawing she had made, a picture of her family standing together, with "Justice" written in bold letters across the top. Judge Victoria Hale entered the courtroom, her expression composed but resolute. She had spent the past few nights reviewing every piece of evidence, determined to ensure a fair trial. As she took her seat, she noticed Amara's hopeful eyes and gave the slightest nod of reassurance. The proceedings began with the defense calling Detective Caleb Morris to the stand. Caleb testified about the offshore accounts and the paper trail leading back to Marcus Langston. He explained how the transactions matched the timeline of the alleged embezzlement and presented further emails showing Langston's efforts to pressure Grayson into taking actions that would implicate him. The prosecution attempted to discredit Caleb's findings, suggesting the evidence was circumstantial, but Caleb remained calm and professional, dismantling their arguments with precise answers. The evidence speaks for itself, he concluded. The funds were moved under Mr. Langston's direction, not Mr. Hall's. Next, the defense called an unexpected witness, a former employee of Langston's company. The woman, Clara Reeves, had been hesitant to come forward but was finally ready to speak. Clara testified that she had been aware of Langston's schemes but had remained silent out of fear of retaliation. "He threatened to ruin my career if I said anything," she admitted. "But I couldn't stay quiet any longer." Clara's testimony was a turning point. She described how Langston manipulated employees and used Grayson as a convenient scapegoat, knowing his vulnerable situation would make him less likely to fight back. "He knew about Mr. Hall's daughter," Clara said, her voice shaking. "He used it against him." The courtroom was silent as her words hung in the air. Victoria observed Langston's reaction, noting the way his jaw tightened and his fists clenched. His attorney looked visibly flustered, whispering furiously to him. When it was time for Langston to testify again, his demeanor was markedly different. Under the defense's cross-examination, he faltered, stumbling over his words as he tried to deflect responsibility. I didn't know about the offshore accounts," he claimed, but his earlier emails contradicted him. The defense attorney leaned forward, his voice steady. "Mr. Langston, are you saying these emails sent from your account, are fabricated?" Langston hesitated, his silence speaking volumes. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, and Victoria struck her gavel to restore order. "Answer the question, Mr. Langston," she said firmly. Langston sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I made mistakes," he admitted reluctantly. "But I didn't mean for it to go this far." The admission was a crack in the armor, and the defense seized the moment to solidify their case. By the time Langston stepped down, it was clear to everyone in the courtroom that he had orchestrated the fraud and used Grayson as a scapegoat. During the recess, Victoria stepped into her chambers to collect her thoughts. The weight of the case pressed heavily on her, but she felt a sense of clarity. The evidence was overwhelming, and justice was within reach. When the court reconvened, the defense made its closing argument, painting a vivid picture of Grayson's desperation as a father trying to save his daughter. "He made mistakes," the attorney admitted, "but they were mistakes born of love, not greed. The true culprit in this case is Marcus Langston, who exploited Grayson's vulnerability for his own gain." The prosecution's closing argument was weaker, their confidence shaken by the mountain of evidence against Langston. They attempted to argue that Grayson's actions were still illegal, but their words lacked conviction. Victoria adjourned the court for the day, stating that the jury would deliberate the next morning. As the courtroom emptied, Amara ran to her father, throwing her arms around him. "I'm so proud of you, Dad," she said softly. Grayson hugged her tightly, his voice thick with emotion. "Whatever happens, Amara, I'm proud of you too. You're the reason I kept fighting." Victoria watched the scene from the bench, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and determination. The case wasn't over yet, but she knew they had done everything possible to uncover the truth. Justice was closer than ever, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in a hopeful outcome. The morning of the jury's deliberation was heavy with anticipation. Grayson sat in the courtroom, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Amara was not present. Victoria had arranged for her to stay with Linda Moore during the final proceedings, wanting to shield her from the tension of the verdict. Despite the absence of her bright presence, Grayson carried her words with him. "No matter what, Dad, you'll always be my hero." Judge Victoria Hale entered the courtroom, her expression steady. She glanced at the jury, their faces revealing little of what their discussions might have yielded. "This court is now in session," she announced, her voice firm. The foreperson of the jury stood, holding a folded piece of paper. "We, the jury, have reached a verdict," he declared, his voice echoing in the silent room. Victoria's gaze didn't waver as she gestured for the verdict to be handed to her. She unfolded the paper and read its contents carefully. As she looked up, her face gave nothing away, but she could feel the room's collective tension. "Will the defendant please rise?" she said. Grayson stood, his face pale but resolute. His attorney placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "In the matter of the charges of embezzlement and fraud against Grayson Hall," Victoria began, "the jury finds the defendant not guilty." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom, followed by murmurs of relief and disbelief. Grayson closed his eyes, a wave of emotion washing over him as his knees nearly buckled. His attorney gripped his arm, steadying him. Victoria struck her gavel. "Order in the court," she called, restoring silence. She continued, her voice measured. "This court finds that the evidence presented not only exonerates Mr. Hall but implicates Marcus Langston in a broader scheme of financial misconduct. The court recommends that Mr. Langston be immediately investigated for his role in this matter." Langston, who had been sitting in the gallery, stood abruptly, his face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous," he shouted. His attorney quickly pulled him back down, whispering urgently to calm him. Victoria fixed Langston with a piercing gaze. "Mr. Langston, further outbursts will not be tolerated. The justice system will now turn its attention to your actions." With that, Victoria adjourned the court, her gavel striking the bench one final time. Grayson turned to his attorney, shaking his hand with gratitude before hurrying out of the courtroom. Outside, he found Linda and Amara waiting for him. The moment Amara saw him, she broke into a run, her arms outstretched. "Dad," she cried, her face lit with pure joy. Grayson knelt, catching her in a tight embrace. "We did it, Amara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We're free." Linda smiled, her eyes misty. "Congratulations, Mr. Hall. You've earned this." Later that afternoon, Victoria found herself back in her chambers, reviewing the case's final notes. A knock at the door broke her concentration, and when she looked up, she saw Grayson and Amara standing in the doorway. "I hope we're not interrupting," Grayson said, his tone hesitant. Victoria smiled, gesturing for them to enter. "Not at all. What can I do for you?" Amara stepped forward, clutching something behind her back. "We just wanted to say thank you," she said shyly. She brought her hands forward, revealing a small, hand-drawn picture. It showed Victoria standing between Grayson and Amara, all three of them smiling under a bright sun. Across the top, in bold, colorful letters, were the words, "Thank you for believing." Victoria took the picture, her chest tightening with emotion. "This is beautiful, Amara," she said. "Thank you." Grayson extended a hand, his expression earnest. "Thank you for giving us a chance. I don't know where we'd be without you." Victoria shook his hand firmly. "You don't need to thank me. The truth was always there, it just needed a chance to be heard." Amara grinned. "And you helped us make it happen." As they left, Victoria placed the drawing on her desk, a reminder of why she had chosen her career in the first place. For all the challenges, for all the gray areas and tough decisions, moments like this made it worth it. Justice had been served, but more importantly, a family had been given a second chance. The days following the verdict were filled with a mix of relief, joy, and adjustment for Grayson and Amara. With the charges behind them and Marcus Langston now under investigation, they were finally free to focus on rebuilding their lives. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope, a chance for stability, happiness, and healing. Grayson started looking for work, determined to provide for Amara without the shadow of his past hanging over him. Despite the challenges, he approached the task with newfound confidence, bolstered by the knowledge that he had a fresh start. Amara, meanwhile, returned to school, eager to catch up with her classmates and share stories of how her father had been cleared of all wrongdoing. Judge Victoria Hale couldn't stop thinking about the case, even after the file had been closed. It had been unlike any other trial she had presided over, striking a personal chord that left a lasting impression. Victoria often found herself looking at the drawing Amara had given her, which now hung prominently in her office. It reminded her of the humanity behind the law, the lives affected by each decision she made. One evening, Victoria received an unexpected call. It was Grayson. "Your Honor," he began, his voice hesitant, "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all," Victoria replied. "What's on your mind?" "I just wanted to thank you again," he said. "Amara and I are doing well, and I thought you might like to know that I've been offered a job. It's not much, but it's honest work." Victoria smiled, genuinely happy for him. "That's wonderful news, Mr. Hall. You've come a long way." "There's something else," Grayson continued. "Amara wanted to invite you to dinner. She said it's our way of saying thank you." Victoria hesitated for a moment, the formality of her position clashing with the warmth of the gesture. "I'd be honored," she said finally. That weekend, Victoria arrived at their modest apartment, carrying a bouquet of flowers for Amara. The door opened to reveal the girl, her face lighting up with excitement. "Judge Hale," she exclaimed. "You came." "Of course," Victoria replied, handing her the flowers. "These are for you." Amara beamed, taking the bouquet and carefully placing it in a vase on the kitchen counter. The apartment had a cozy, welcoming atmosphere, filled with the aroma of homemade lasagna. Grayson greeted Victoria warmly, shaking her hand before leading her to the small dining table. The dinner was simple but heartfelt. As they ate, Amara shared stories about school, her favorite books, and her dreams of becoming a lawyer one day. "I want to help people, like you helped us," she said earnestly, looking at Victoria. Victoria's chest tightened with emotion. "You'd make an excellent lawyer, Amara," she said. "You're brave, smart, and you care about others. Those are the qualities that matter most." Grayson chimed in, his voice filled with pride. "She gets that from her mother," he said. "And from people like you, Your Honor." After dinner, Amara brought out her sketchbook, showing Victoria more of her drawings. One in particular caught Victoria's eye. It was a courtroom scene, with Amara standing confidently behind a desk, addressing a smiling judge. "Is this you?" Victoria asked, pointing to the girl in the drawing. Amara nodded. "It's what I want to be when I grow up. Maybe one day, I can help someone the way you helped us." Victoria placed a hand on Amara's shoulder, her voice soft. "I have no doubt that you will." As the evening came to an end, Victoria said her goodbyes, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Grayson walked her to the door, his expression earnest. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay you," he said. "But I want you to know how much this meant to us." "You already have," Victoria replied. "Seeing you and Amara thriving is all the thanks I need." As Victoria drove home, she reflected on how much the case had changed her, not just as a judge, but as a person. It reminded her that the law wasn't just about rules and procedures, it was about people, their struggles, and their triumphs. And in this case, it was about a little girl who refused to give up on her father and a man who proved that love and determination could overcome even the darkest of circumstances. When Victoria returned to her office the next day, she glanced at Amara's drawing on the wall and smiled. It was more than just a picture, it was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of family. This story is a powerful reminder of the profound impact of truth, resilience, and compassion. It highlights the complexities of justice, not just as a system of laws, but as a human endeavor to balance fairness with empathy. At its core, it's about the lengths we go to for those we love, and how even in our darkest moments, hope can light the way. Grayson's journey from desperation to redemption is a testament to the strength of parental love, while Amara's bravery shows us how even the smallest voices can make the biggest difference. Judge Victoria Hale embodies the delicate balance between upholding the law and recognizing the human stories that underlie every case. Her decision to see beyond the surface and fight for the truth reminds us of the critical role compassion plays in justice. The ending, with Amara dreaming of becoming a lawyer, beautifully closes the loop, showing how acts of kindness and fairness can inspire the next generation to continue making the world a better place. This story leaves us with hope and the belief that even when the odds seem insurmountable, love, determination, and integrity can overcome any obstacle.